Welcome, everyone. My name is Trevor, and today I am joined by my co-host here, Nick Simpson, also known as Wealthmatica. And today we have the incredible opportunity to interview the one and only Anthony Rocketman Holstein. Anthony, thanks for coming on to the podcast today.
Absolutely, and to the moon. Yeah, it's
Right
great to
on.
be here today and to discuss about some of the most important industry many investors are still not understanding a lot because it's really complicated. So I hope I can demystify some elements about this industry and make it more understood today.
That's great. Now I'm looking very forward to it. Anthony, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are and why you choose to invest in the space sector specifically?
Yeah. I'm Anthony. I'm 20 years old. I I'm an aerospace engineering technician. So, in Quebec, we first go to Cégep. So it's like college, but a little different. And it's like a bridge between high school and university. So you can do a technical degree and go directly to work, or you can go to university after. So I did a technical degree in aerospace engineering. So I can work as a technician, but I've decided to go and to pursue an engineering. So I'm now studying to become an engineering, an aerospace engineering, um, actually mechanical engineering, but work in the aerospace field after. And and I've decided to invest in space stocks because since I'm a kid, I've been passionate about the space industry, not financially, but uh, because it's super inspiring. Like it's super incredible, like how humans can build such massive vehicle that goes to that go to space and send super heavy payload that can like some payloads like weigh like dozens of buses and like it's launching into space. So it's I found this very like incredible in terms
Mhm.
of engineering and like I think I was already like passionate about engineering when I was young. So it's more like the technical aspect and inspiring aspect, both of them that drove me into the space industry. And I've been following many companies like SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and 2015, 16, 17, 18. So it's been a long time since I know these companies. And when I started my investing journey, one of the first stock I bought was Rocket Lab, of course, and I think it was a super great choice because it has now like since then 10x in my portfolio. But also, I think it's like we are at the moment where investing in space is like the most it like it's the most significant and uh, like moment to invest in space because it's still super early and yet it's still scaling super quickly. So it's a good moment to get in if we want to be in space stocks long term. And yeah,
Awesome. That's amazing. So clearly you have a very strong understanding of the space industry as a whole. Why don't we take a quick step back here and say for somebody who's watching this podcast from home who doesn't have, as strong of an understanding as the space industry as you do, can you give us a quick summary of the industry, who the biggest players are, and how do these companies actually make money?
yeah, of course. So the space industry is really, I find this very collaborative. So for instance, you can have a company that's ordering a satellite. So another space company will produce the parts, make the satellite, and then another company will launch it. And then maybe another company will operate it and send data to the first company that ordered the satellite. So it's really interesting because everything is connected. And on top of that, there's the government aspect. So many agencies will contract commercial companies to um, well, sorry, they
There
will
you go.
they will contract commercial partners to make satellites for them, and most of the time, those satellites are super important because it's it's relying on, for instance, like the war in Ukraine. Many agencies like NASA for the uh, for like ordered some not NASA but like the Space Force and U.S. Air Force contract some U.S. companies to make satellites for like spying satellites, and on board of those satellites there are some AI tools. So it's really like relevant today to to have like make satellites for like super like make satellites for like, sorry, my English is very bad this morning. Let's go back a little. So yeah, U.S. Agencies will will contract companies to make satellites for everything that's happening in the world today, like the war in Ukraine. And how it works is generally you have a company that specializes into launch services, space systems, but there are also companies that are like end-to-end, like Rocket Lab or Firefly Aerospace. So you have companies that make both satellites and that also provides launch services. So it's really interesting because for a long time, when a company had difficulties with launches, like Firefly in 2015, long time before it IPO'd, they had a lot of troubles with their rocket, and they had no other source of revenue. So when the rocket kept failing, well, they ran out of money and almost went bankrupt. So they actually filed for bankruptcy like 7 or 8 years ago before going back strong 2 or 3 years ago, and it just IPO'd this year, so it's now public. And another thing that's interesting is that most of most of like revenue coming from those companies are from defense contracts, are coming from defense contracts. So as we move on with the Golden Dome, it's going to be super interesting how much of those companies are going to to get like money from those government agency um, to build satellites and other things related to the Golden Dome and make it working, because it's a lot of money and related to the contract. Yeah.
So Anthony, to interject, what you're saying right now is that the space industry is at a point of time where there's a massive catalyst, and that catalyst is government funding. And the
Yeah,
government is
that's
now
right.
turning over to this specific industry and focusing on this industry to make it more robust, posing a phenomenal investment opportunity through your eyes. Is that
Yeah,
correct? Is that sort of
that's
just a
correct.
brief synopsis? Okay, great, awesome.
Exactly. And um, most like we've seen it this week with Trump signing an executive order for bringing Americans back to the moon by 2030. So and we are getting Artemis 2 missions from NASA next year, which will bring back astronauts around the moon for the first time since 1972. So it's really like we are in a race right now, and many government agencies, space agencies, want to be first in this sector. Like between China and America, it's a race right now. So of course, the U.S. government will put a lot of money into the space industry and especially into space, into commercial partners like public and private companies to make satellites for them and like make the infrastructure in space so we can send back astronauts to the moon and make this possible before any like before other agencies. And with the tariff thing at the beginning of the year, Canada noticed that we are very far away from having a sovereign access to space. So I think we'll talk about it later, but it's really interesting to see how the recent, like this year has been, I think, a very important year in terms of how like Canada's relation with the US, and it's great to see Canada's finally like making like huge step forward a sovereign access to space. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I know you definitely touched on a few topics that we'll discuss further on in this interview. Right now, I kind of want to shift over to your portfolio. So you mentioned that, the industry as a whole is in an inflection point right now, and you
Yeah.
are heavily invested into this industry. I believe around 75% of your portfolio makes up of three companies. We've got Intuitive Surgical, ticker LUNR, Rocket Lab, and we
Intuitive
have
machines,
Intuitive
not
Machines.
surgical.
Sorry. What did I say? Oh, yeah,
Intuitive
completely different
surgical. Yeah,
company.
yeah.
Yeah, Intuitive Machines. You're
It's
right.
confusing. Yeah.
I got the ticker symbol right though. That's all that matters.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we've got MDA Space and Rocket Lab. So why don't you tell us a little bit about each of those three companies and why you're invested into those three, particularly over any other space company out there?
Yeah. So first thing, what I'm particularly interested with those three companies is that most of their contracts are coming from the government again. Of course, as many of these companies, but those one in particular, they really rely on government contracts to work. Of course, this is a risk, but with the current geopolitical situation where US want to be first, Canada wants to be first, those companies get a lot of contracts and like to build satellites, to build infrastructure to return to the moon first. And even like so I'm not investing, for instance, in Black Sky, but it's a super interesting company because this one provides like high-res imagery for agencies who wants to get real-time information, satellite information around the world. So it's really interesting. And yeah, for Intuitive Machines, what I particularly interested is that it's the only company that is really focused on the moon. So all the infrastructure, everything that's related to communication. Last year, they got awarded a 4.2 billion, I think, indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contract. So this is an up to 4.2 billion contract, which is incredible, massive. And the stock is still very low compared to the potential value they can get from this contract. And also they have been like sending payloads for NASA under the CLPS, so the Commercial Lunar Payload Services initiative from NASA, where NASA contracts small companies to, well, not generally, but like companies from all sizes, but generally like emerging space companies to, like they drop some low-cost contracts for them to send instruments to the moon so they can prepare like the terrain for sending astronauts to the moon again. And for the first two missions, Lunar crashed on the moon, and many investors didn't like it and lost trust. But it's not the main source of revenue for Lunar in the long term. Most of the revenue will be coming from their multi-billion contract they got last year for communication, and the upcoming one they might get with, I think it's 60. I'm pretty sure it's like they will get it at 66% chance because so this contract they might get is the Lunar Terrain Vehicle contract. It's a contract from NASA, I think again 4 billion, which will allow astronauts to drive a vehicle on the moon to drive. And there are three companies running this contract, and one of them, of course, is Intuitive Machines. The two other are not public. It's Astrobotic and Lunar Outpost. And only Intuitive Machines and Lunar Outpost got their vehicle human rated. So both companies, humans could like it's rated for human to drive it and it's safe and everything per NASA's requirements. And there have been some rumors that NASA will split the contract in half between two companies. So there's a high chance Intuitive Machine gets it, and Lunar Outpost gets it as well. So even if it's a split 50-50, that would still be another 2 billion in backlog for Intuitive Machines, which is on top on the 4 billion from last year they got. So 6 billion in backlog compared to few dozens of millions for the lunar landing missions, I think most investors are still not understanding intuitive machines super well, and it's a big opportunity. So that's the reason I'm mostly in lunar right now. I think it's cheap for the long term, not right now. It's maybe still overvalued, like many space stocks. I haven't run calculations, but like many space stocks, there's a lot of hype. So of course, valuations are a bit crazy right now, but yeah. And then we have MDA Space, which is a Canadian company. So interesting thing is that now MDA Space is somewhat linked to intuitive machines if we go to the ancestor tree. So intuitive machines recently acquired Lenteris, which is a company that previously was owned by Maxor Technologies. And MDA previously was also a Maxor company. So now Intuitive Machines owned a previously owned Maxor company, and MDA, which was also a Maxor company. Well, this one says like beside, but LUNR acquired Lenteris, which is Maxor related in the past. So really interesting because Lenteris for lunar is a bit like MDA Space, but it's a bit different. But they provide space systems like Rocket Lab. I will go in a few seconds. So everything that's components like solar panels, reaction wheels, so everything that's inside the satellites. And I think that it's a turning point for lunar to acquire Lenteris because if it's like MDA Space, both at the same root, Maxor technology. So it's going to be super interesting. Now, to go back on MDA Space, I think it's super interesting because as the Canada's government invests massively in and Canadian space companies, I think this one will continue for the next few years to get some contracts from the government. And MDA has been super profitable. So I don't have the numbers right now, but I know they for Q2 2025, Q2 2025, they doubled their EPS. That's positive, unlike many space companies. So MDA is really profitable and they execute a lot. So they have a massive backlog, and every quarter they execute like I think I'm not sure of the number, but it's well above $500 million of backlog that is converted into revenue each quarter. So it's incredible. And yeah, they execute super well. And I'm very confident on the management as well. So one thing about MDA Space recently is that it crashed for no apparent reason. So many investors got afraid of the director selling a lot of shares. But when the stock goes like 500% up, I think it's normal for like the directors to sell some shares because it's rewarding, of course. So they want maybe to secure some shares. Yeah, also MDA, I was thinking about something I forgot, but MDA Space, yeah. So another thing that crashed MDA recently is EcoStar, which moved from MDA to SpaceX. So they got EcoStar had a multi-billion contract with MDA Space, but due to a business change, they just like ended the contract, which was not even started yet. So it didn't affect much MDA Space. And as MDA said multiple times, it won't affect the long-term business because MDA is already doing super well. It has a lot of contracts. It has a lot of customers, a diversified base of customers. So it's not an issue for MDA. So I think right now is a super great opportunity as well. And definitely if LUNR, like I think I made a post about it on Blossom, when LUNR gets above my threshold for in terms of volatility, I will sell some LUNR to rebalance into MDA to increase my position because it's super on sale right now and it's still a bit overvalued, but not and like with how profitable it is, I think it's less risky than LUNR. That's currently 40% of my position. And Rocket Lab right now, so that's my third biggest position. For a long time, it has been my first position, and it's the stock where I've made where I 10x. So of course I've been lucky because if I started investing 2 years earlier, I would have maybe made half the gain at least because Rocket Lab IPO'd in 2021 at $20, I think, or 18. I have it here. No, it went public at $10. Sorry, and for a long time it's been between $5, $6, $3. So for a long time, early investors who got during the IPO were down like massive numbers, and it took a few years to get up to where we are at now, $70 USD. And I invested most of my money when it was back at $4. So of course, very lucky because I could have invested at $10 and make half the gain. And yeah, it's my biggest win. And Rocket Lab, what's super interesting is it's divided into two segments. One segment that's launches, so they have rockets that launch satellites, and have another segment, space systems, which is everything that's space components. So solar panels, reaction wheels, as I've said earlier. And what's unique with Rocket Lab is that it's end-to-end. So that means they will do everything from building a satellite to launching it, to operating it in orbit. So everything step by step. So one customer can go to Rocket Lab, order a satellite, and in Rocket Lab will do everything from building the solar panels that will go into the satellite, building the satellite itself, launching it, and then operating it for the customer and sending back data for them. So it's a super diversified business.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I want to touch a little bit more on Rocket Lab. So I know they recently signed, I believe it was $816 million contract last
Yeah.
week with the Space Development Agency. Can you tell us a little bit more about that contract and how overall the space industry ties into the defense industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So this contract comes after another contract in December 2023 from the same customer, SDA, the Space Development Agency, which is really tied to national defense in the US. And in December 2023, they got a first contract for them for 500 million. At that time, it was again their biggest contract. And this week, they got another contract from them, $9 million, and again, their biggest contract to date. So this is their biggest customer, and of course, it's tied to the national defense. And it's a very important customer because not only does Rocket Lab, it allows Rocket Lab to generate revenue through space companies, but also building those satellites. So there's a lot of revenue. There's a lot of money going everywhere in Rocket Lab when those contracts come in, and a lot of segments from the business is affected positively by those contracts. And for instance, in Toronto, Rocket Lab has a facility where they build reaction wheels. But what's super interesting about national defense contract for Rocket Lab is that many facilities can't contact each other. So when the US do send a contract to Rocket Lab for interest reasons and because it's related to defense, everything in the US stays in the US, and no one and Canada and New Zealand knows what's going on. They can, I think, build maybe the parts, ship them, but then everything will be maybe tweaked in the US to meet the requirements from the customer without other facilities knowing it. So there's a few things going on, I think, so that everything stays super private for the US government. And one quick super interesting thing, not a lot of investors know, is that the CIA was invested into Rocket Lab for a long time. So if you guys didn't know, the CIA has a venture capitalist fund, NQTEL, and for a long time, the CIA was invested into Rocket Lab and exited in I think 2024. So yeah, that's super interesting because Rocket Lab has a lot of relation of connection with the US government. And like I think the best move for them was to move from New Zealand to become a US company in 2013, I think. So since a decade, they are now a US company, even though they are based from New Zealand. And to go back to the second part of your question, which was about national defense, that's right. Like our
It was more about how the space sector ties into the defense sector.
yeah. So the defense sector needs a lot of help from the space companies to build those satellites that can provide real-time information, provide super sensitive information about countries. Like as I've said earlier, with the war in Ukraine, Russia, for instance, needed satellites to spy Ukraine. So they did some like I guess Russian companies, space companies, helped the Russian government to send some satellites to spy over Ukraine. But there's a lot of more positive things because there's, I think, I'm not sure if it's Black Sky or Planet Lab, but there's one company that provided help with his IRIS imagery satellite for Ukraine, like telling which side of the country was more affected, which side of the country needed more, for instance, telecommunication connectivity. And Starlink is another, like Starlink among many low latency mega constellation satellites for telecommunications allows also the national national defenses to get access to priority data over other other everyone. So they can have like a spatial network and everything. So it's really interesting because many space companies will have a segment really that's for national security, like Rocket Lab, Intuitive Machines. They will have a particular segment of their business for national security, and that segment will I forgot what I was saying, but this segment is mostly like what's driving most of those businesses' revenue, and it's super important because, as I've said, U.S. defense is needed nowadays. Like when a government needs something, it has to be done like now, and so companies have to be ready for meeting national defense requirements. For instance, Firefly, I think it's Firefly that flew within 24 hours notice a rocket for the US Air Force in 2024. So it's a quick example of how quick those businesses need to support governments.
Now, Anthony, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Since you brought up In-Q-Tel, I have some experience. As you know, I've dabbled in the space industry myself. I've temporarily exited the space industry just due to some of the hype that you're talking about and profit taking. Now, specifically, I've touched two stocks, one being Rocket Lab, which is the one stock we're talking about right now, but two is Black Skies Technology. You've brought it up a couple times.
Yeah.
Now, I know within the industry, and this is where I want some commentary from you. Within the industry, there tends to be a lot of these sort of what do you want to call it? Niches, right?
Yeah.
One of those niches is geospatial technology. that is what Black Sky Technologies and Planet Labs focuses on. Now, Planet Labs is the one that everybody's kind of talking about right now because the stock's running up. They've had fantastic earnings, I think over 33% top line growth this past quarter. And Google owns about 10% of that company. And not to mention, I believe the Canadian Pension Fund also has a stake in Planet Labs, which is pretty cool. Now, specifically, that relationship between In-Q-Tel and Rocket Lab, it's unique because Black Sky also has a very similar relationship. In-Q-Tel, I believe one of the board of directors on Black Sky used to actually work for the CIA and have like a director's position somewhere within that agency, specifically handling In-Q-Tel and these investment arms. So I find that very interesting. Now,
Yeah, that's super interesting.
yeah, now in terms of the niche and geospatial technology, do you see the space industry ripe for consolidation? Do you theoretically see a company like Black Sky Technologies, which is having some issues with funding right now, but has fundamentally a great technology, integrating with an end-to-end systems technology company like
Yeah.
Rocket Lab? Do you see that happening in the future? Can you provide some more commentary here?
Um, I think it could happen. Like most businesses like to be really diversified nowadays. So if a segment of the business like goes silent for a few months, few quarters, few years, for some reasons, they have another segment to um, to generate some revenue. And I think I'm not sure if it's on the radar on Rocket Lab to have geospatial technologies integrated, but that would drive significant amount of revenue for them and probably help, of course, U.S. national security, and that could like that would be probably like another segment of their business as well, like a new segment for them if they start some geospatial connectivity because it has its own like it has its own like like it has its own world like launch services, space systems. Geospatial is really like something that's not related to those to both of those segments, and I think this would add them more capabilities to support governments and like to make real-time decisions based on AI that's analyzing iris imagery from those satellites.
That's interesting. So just to kind of bring an analogy here and to sort of patch this through and rationalize this for some people who are watching this, maybe new investors to the space industry, right? Perhaps an analogy that comes to my mind, challenge me if you think this is wrong, and I'd love your opinion here. An analogy is that generally speaking, the space industry, you could kind of look at it as the AI data center build out, right?
Yeah,
Massive undertaking. You have these companies building these end-to-end systems, whether they be, data cloud center providers and builders all in one, or if they're building AI ecosystems, sort of like Nebius. Where Black Sky and Planet Labs, this is a niche. This is almost like an AI tool provider. This is an actual tangible, like software as a service, a SaaS business, but deployed to space. Is that a fair analogy?
yeah, that's right. That's right. I agree. And yeah, one thing I didn't mention for now was you brought the topic AI data centers in space. That's going to be massive for all of the companies I mentioned. For instance, Rocket Lab launching satellites for supporting those AI data centers in space. MDA Space to build those satellites. Rocket Lab can also build those satellites, but MDA's business is mainly this. And Intuitive Machines is focused on infrastructure, lunar infrastructure. So maybe LUNR can get access to some contracts to build some AI data centers in space, especially now with the acquisition of Lanteris, which is super focused on space systems. They now have the capability to they will have the capability to support the manufacture of satellites for AI data centers. So it's really interesting. And AI, we've got like AI. The first step was like having those first AI chatbots live. Then having any apps with AI integrated in it. Then having super powerful data centers to power those AI. Then having enough infrastructure to make those AI data centers, and then we want to move to space because AI data centers will be more will work more efficiently because on Earth you need to get a lot of like power consumption and everything to cool those data centers, while in space you're directly in space, so you like unless the sun is directly pointed to the satellites, it's minus 200 degrees. So yeah, it's going to be super interesting, and I'm looking forward to see AI data centers in space one day and invest in companies that support AI data centers. Yeah, in space. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's going to be an incredible opportunity as well.
Yeah.
Now, along with some other things that we have, I want to get your opinions on, obviously 2025 was an incredible year for the space industry as a whole. Now, moving into 2026, we're 2 weeks away from going into the new year. What are some things that you're most excited for, you're looking forward to the most to come in the space industry in the year of 2026?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the recent for the companies I own particularly, I think the recent acquisitions. So Rocket Lab acquired a company that's called Geost, and that companies will enable Rocket Lab to work on like more like space systems that's tied to the US national security. So it's again super interesting for them because that means more revenues from the defense. And for LUNR, it's going to be their acquisition of Lanteris, which will, I think it's a turning point for them because for now, everything that's done was really focused on lunar, but they are on lunar on the moon. But they want to diversify their business so that they don't rely too much on one thing and one customer. That's NASA. So they acquired Lanteris, which is going to put them in a position where they are in competition directly with Rocket Lab, because Rocket Lab also makes space systems, sell space components. So Intuitive Machine is going to do the same in 2026. And what's super interesting is that Lanteris is selling as much, if not more, space components than Rocket Lab does. So when the acquisition closes earlier next year for Intuitive Machine X Lanteris, it's going to be massive because that will put LUNR profitable, I think, in no time. And Rocket Lab will have serious competition with Intuitive Machine. So that's going to be super great to see. And in general, for the space industry, I think it's going to be super inspirational because in April 2026, we're going to see the first astronauts going not on the moon, but around the moon for the first time since 1972. And we will have one Canadian astronaut going to the moon for the first time, Jeremy Hansen. So yeah, that's super inspiring. And of course, like behind the I'm looking for the word. Beyond the inspirational aspect, there's also the scientific advancements aspect. So by going back to the moon, around the moon, studying the moon, we learn more about our satellite. And that's something scientists have been studying for centuries. And now we have the technology to go back to the moon with a local solution, because going to the moon in the 60s was purely for the space race. And that's why we haven't gone back to the moon since then, because the focus was not to to go to the moon to study it. It was just to prove the US had the capabilities to go to the moon and to go to the moon before other countries can. So, and now the goal is really to build a permanent presence to the moon. And President Trump in the US signed an executive order to send astronauts back to the moon by 2028 to the lunar surface, so landing astronauts, and building a permanent base by 2030. So I'm not sure if this is going to be a super accurate timeline, because everything that's related to space, of course, timelines are like, it's really like estimates. So that mission next year was supposed to be in 2020, for instance. So yeah, it can slip very easily. So I wouldn't be surprised if actually a permanent lunar base does not happen until 2040. So in 14 years. But yeah, we'll see. But anyways, all of this will certainly brings a lot of attention to space stocks. A lot of space stocks will continue to have contracts. And for instance, with lunar missions, that's exactly what NASA is doing with its commercial lunar payload services. There are CLPS missions, which where NASA subcontracts some US companies to send instruments to the moon with their lunar landers. That is exactly why Intuitive Machines was sending instruments to the moon. It was to send as much as possible technologies demonstrations so that NASA can pave the way for future astronauts.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think just staying on the topic of 2026. So I know you said all of this stuff is going to be super important for the space industry as a whole. Something else that is probably coming in 2026 is the SpaceX IPO. Now, I
Oh
believe
yeah, SpaceX
as
IPO,
of
I forgot.
as of what I last saw, they were looking to be valued around $1.5 trillion, which would be the biggest IPO of all
Yeah,
time.
and
So two
yeah,
questions for you with that. What are your thoughts on the SpaceX IPO, and will you be investing into SpaceX when they IPO? I'm sure everybody's wondering this question.
yeah. So yeah, first there's something super interesting. So Google had invested, I think, 100 million I think a decade ago into SpaceX. So this investment for them is super strong. And yeah, so that was a quick fun fact. So yeah, SpaceX, what's interesting with their IPO is that when it IPOs, it's going to be the among the Mag 7. So even above Tesla right now with its current valuation, I think. So SpaceX is going to be in the Mag 7. Elon Musk will become the first trillionaire. So this is incredible. But other than that, SpaceX, what's interesting is that they're building the Starship, and they're also making Starlink satellites. They're a mega constellation for real-time low latency internet connectivity. So everywhere you are in the globe, you can use Starlink to get access to internet. I've tried it on a plane back in September, and it was incredible. Like having 400 megabits in a plane. That's crazy. Yeah, so a quick thing about SpaceX, why they're going public is to fund their mission of going to Mars, build a fully reusable rocket Starship, 120 meters tall, heavy lift rocket that can send up to 100 astronauts to Mars. And it's being built outdoors in Texas, just beside the Mexico border. And everyone can go to the facility and see the progress being made, because SpaceX wants to make this super inspiring for everyone. And SpaceX, I agree, has been super inspiring, because since 2018, since I've begun following this program, there have been some 24/7 YouTube recording on YouTube Live, and I followed this like night and days, watching the progress. It was like small aluminum tanks being built outdoors, and small tents. So it's really cool. And yeah, SpaceX originally funded Starship with Starlink the goal with Starlink was purely to fund the Starship vehicle. And that's what also said Musk, is that when we will get to Mars one day, this will be thanks to Starlink. But there's also the need for making SpaceX public so that it can also raise capital more easily and have the capital necessary to continue fund the Starship program to send astronauts and payloads to Mars. And their timeline is like sending for the first time astronauts to Mars like in early 2030, I think, and building a self-sustained city by 2040. So again, timelines will likely slip because it's too like it's just aspirational. It's not like I think it's just to set goal because it's too big. It's not like opening a small door. It's literally going to Mars, bringing astronauts and even civilian to Mars. So that's super interesting. Yeah, that's about it. That's the Starship program, and I will 100% invest in SpaceX because this is I think the most stable business, even though it's a volatile industry, but SpaceX has quite a stable business, mainly thanks to Starlink, but also their current Falcon 9 rocket, which I think they have launched above 150 this year rockets. This is incredible. So one every 2 days. Yeah, so they have a lot of customers, a diversified base of customers, both from private and public companies and governments. Yeah.
Awesome. And even at a $1.5 trillion valuation, you're not worried about that number at all?
I'm not worried. I mean, it can go down, but I might buy more.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I mean, at the long term, like if in 15, 20 years, if SpaceX achieved their goal of bringing astronauts to Mars, of course, they will get a lot of support from the US government to make this possible. So I'm not worried about like them burning a lot of cash, because I didn't mention it a lot today, but the space industry is really a cash-intensive business. So every few months, if a company does not meet their financial requirements for the quarters, they might need to raise some capital to fund the business and continue operations. And there are some businesses that I've called I think a year ago now on Blossom, and told like, oh, this one, they were just like stuck in the raising capital, reverse stock split cycle, and everything. And one of the three already got bankrupt. It's Mynaric. It got acquired by Rocket Lab. So Rocket Lab, it's actually a contractor of Rocket Lab to build lasers for their satellites. And Rocket Lab, to not lose a satellite, they actually bought this company. And they bought it because it put them in a very good position, because they used Mynaric to build the first batch of 18 satellites for the big contractor we discussed earlier. So the Space Development Agency, which has just announced a $900 million contract for Rocket Lab this week. So yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, super excited for SpaceX IPO.
So kind of bouncing off of SpaceX and Starlink, we have your fourth biggest holding, which is Amazon. And now what some people might not know is Amazon actually has some money in the space industry with Project Cooper, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
They changed the name.
Yeah.
They changed the name recently.
They changed the name.
They changed the name?
Yeah, they changed the name to Leo, so it's a reference to Earth orbit. So that's a nice name. I think it's a super great marketing move to call it Leo, because at some point I was expecting a company to do it, but they done it first, so that's super cool. Because Kuiper did it, Cooper, I don't know
Cooper,
either
yeah.
how to pronounce it, but
Yeah.
that it didn't have much meaning, I think, but LEO is really fire because it literally means low Earth orbit. So that's the orbital altitude those satellites, low latency satellites, are orbiting to make sure like everything is very fast, smooth, and everything. So that's a really great marketing move for Amazon. And yeah, they have some money in the space industry. So Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, has also a company that is named Blue Origin, which has sent Katy Perry into space. You probably heard. Yeah, so they launch civilians into space every now and then, and Amazon has a space segment as well. So they are just like launching their low latency mega constellation for internet connectivity. It's exactly like Starlink, but what I'm particularly bullish about Amazon Leo is that one day it might have on board AWS servers. So instead of like for companies when they want AWS servers set up so they can run their app anywhere in the world with low latency, in the future, AWS, instead of being in data centers around the globe, AWS might be in those satellites orbiting Earth. And because those satellites communicate through laser in real time, it can send data around the globe really fast. And so instead of having like 400 milliseconds of latency, maybe you would have like 20, 40 milliseconds, which is a massive jump. And yeah, so I'm really bullish on Amazon. Of course, that's a great business. Ironically, it's not my biggest position, even though it's the most stable business in my portfolio. But yeah, I love Amazon, and I'm very bullish for their space endeavors.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about Amazon. I'm very bullish Amazon too. It's a large position in my portfolio. Now, something that you mentioned that kind of captivated my attention, and it kind of connected some dots too, because I'm working on the continued thesis for the robotic build out, the robotic opportunity that Amazon has.
Yeah,
And this is connected into space because you talk about low latency communication for AWS. This is quite the investment opportunity in my eyes, right? Talking about just theoretically expanding forward, 2030, 2035, 2040 sort of timeline here. Theoretically, Project Kuiper, now Leo, is in operation. And we have AWS data centers in space. And we also have a massive robotic workforce that's being deployed.
yeah,
That robotic workforce needs an ecosystem to orchestrate and communicate. Low latency is critical
yeah,
for
it's the key.
environment, right? Now, theoretically, once again, expanding forward, if we take that AWS framework that deployed AWS internally as a software optimization and sort of development ecosystem so that Amazon could get products out to market faster, and then eventually they morph that into a customer-facing customer product, you could see the same thing happen with the robotics department in the future. We know what's
Yeah,
happening. We know they're working on it, and this is why the space industry is so cool, right? Because you're seeing a technological revolution happen here on Earth and
exactly. And
in
it's,
space at the same time
yeah,
in
that's
tandem,
right.
right? So this is where the amalgamation through my eyes, and I definitely want some of your thoughts on this too, because I guarantee you've thought about this as well.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of the space industry amalgamating with AI and robotics?
Oh, that's a great, super cool question. I think like AI and robotics cannot happen without space. So just like defense, it's really tied to like AI will be really tied to the space industry to, as I said earlier, like send AI data centers into space to so it's more like efficient. Those data centers are more efficient, can provide more power because the power isn't lost by heat or everything that's happening on Earth currently. Those AI data centers are super consuming, and for robotics, especially having like some connectivity with satellites is going to also like diversify the business a bit, because many companies are still probably in early stages of their business, and this is a super like new like it's super new technologies being made. So this is a super early segment of the space industry to dig in, find companies that will help those robotics and AI companies have services up to space to support them on Earth.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think another thing that, when you look at the whole AI narrative, companies will bring AI and utilize AI in their businesses to make their underlying businesses more efficient.
Yeah,
So if they can in turn send these data centers to space to make these data centers more efficient, I think it's going to be a no-brainer. It'll be more of a short-term investment, a short-term hit for, a long-term benefit.
look,
But
exactly. Yeah,
as a business owner and as a long-term investor, as all three of us are, we would rather see companies we own invest into stuff that's going to benefit the company over the long term rather than short-term gains. So
yeah,
I think that's really incredible. I've got a few more questions here. I'm sure Nick has a couple more questions as well. But I kind of want to shift back to Canada. So we
yeah.
know that Canada has been investing heavier into sovereign access to space, so we can send satellites to space out of Canada and not just having to rely on the US. How important are these investments for Canada's role in the space industry as a whole?
Super, super important. So for a long time, the Canadian Space Agency was relying on NASA. So this is super, like, I mean, it's great to have agencies collaborating with each other, but it's it's better for agencies to have a sovereign access to space. So NASA to keep their like everything in the US, Canada to keep Canadian Space Agency to keep everything in Canada, and then you have European Space Agency to like. I think it's great. All agencies keep everything at home, so it helps businesses to grow. It helps drive more. Like it helps with employment. So you have more. So instead of relying on the US to build something, you can rely on a Canadian company to build that satellite, like MDA Space. And when we will have a Canadian launch company, this is going to be this is going to be super great, because we won't be relying on Rocket Lab. Of course, this isn't great for my portfolio because I want Rocket Lab to get as much of launches as possible. But like I think Canada shouldn't rely to like US companies to launch their satellites, especially the Canadian Space Agency, which is super tied to the Canadian government, like RadarSat, which was I think I'm not sure of the specs of the satellite, but it was a satellite that, if I'm not wrong, was really tied to the Canadian government. And we launched it in the US on a Falcon 9 rocket, I think. So I think it would have been best to launch this super secret payload on a Canadian rocket, and Canada doesn't have this capability yet. And like Canada has been working on some space things since like 50 years ago, so it's been a long time, and we are missing a lot of things. So we got some companies like Maritime Launch Services and the East Coast of Canada that for a long time was promising a rocket, I think Cyclone rocket. That's so this would have been the rocket which was a modified rocket from a Ukrainian company, I think. But since the war, unfortunately, Maritime Launch Services had to change the business model a bit and couldn't get this rocket on time to support operations on time and keep the business going, everything. So they've decided to focus on a suborbital launch pad and an orbital launch pad in the east coast of Canada. And that's the challenge. And that's part of why we haven't have any rocket companies in Canada. It's because it's hard to launch rockets when you're far from the equator. So the closer you are, less the less mass you need to propel to space because of how Earth's move on poles compared to the equator. So it's more of a challenge, and that's a challenge Rocket Lab has in New Zealand, but it works. So why wouldn't it work in Canada? And so we have now some companies like I think it's North Space and Toronto, if I'm not wrong, that's building a rocket. And recently the government has been investing massively into this company, into MDA, and into maritime launch services. So 3 companies that will shape the next few years for Canada's and the space industry, because North Space is going to build the orbital rocket. Oh, and there's also Reaction Dynamics in Quebec and Montreal that's also building a rocket, an orbital rocket. So yeah, the government has been investing massively into those companies and also into MDA, which is the main core of the space business in Canada. They are the biggest space satellite manufacturer in Canada. And then we have Maritime Launch Services, which is building the first orbital launch pad in Canada. So 4 companies really that's going to change how Canada is that is going to change Canada's access to space over the next few years.
So I have a quick question for you. Quick follow-up on MDA Space and some Canadian companies. Now, I've noticed that their popularity is really, really rising in the ranks recently. And so much so, I was at a hockey game last night. This a quick segue. I was at a hockey game last night, and I couldn't help but notice. I sent this picture to Trevor. They had ads everywhere. They not only had ads on the ice, but they had ads on Zambonis. They had intermissions where they featured as a, as a sponsor at this hockey game. We'll put the overlay over top of this video when we do the editing, but it's quite interesting to see that happen, right? Going from a small Canadian company to now this massive tech company focusing on space innovation. Now, quickly for the listeners, so new investors coming in, watching this video or watching this clip, can you break down very quickly, very directly, what the value proposition for MDA Space is? What separates it from other companies? Why is this a good investment, particularly?
I think it's mainly part of how good they are at executing their backlog. So, I mean, they have a 4 billion backlog, and every quarter, 500 million at least is getting converted into revenue. Then you have a great management team. So, like, it's not just like, oh, we got contracts, we will raise money, and we will convert our backlog slowly and everything. Now, the MDI is really like focus on converting the backlog, and that's what has been working. And it seems simple, converting a backlog, but it's actually complicated because you have to fulfill the contracts, and it requires a lot of employees depending on the contract size. It requires a lot of engineering behind to manufacture those satellites, produce the parts, everything. Then you have to assemble everything, and there's a lot of things going on, and it's not like something that is done easily. Yet MDA is able to like make dozens of satellites for a customer within a few months and have them shipped and ready to launch. And that's mainly why I'm really like bullish on MDA, is how good they are. It's not just like, I mean, it could be subjective, but to me it's a fact. Like they are really like they have a strong focus on how to operate a business. They're not just like, oh, we will dilute shareholders and we will work on this and let's see what other contracts we can get in so we can survive another year. Because unfortunately, many space companies, and that's the trap of investing in space companies, is that it's a business that's cash intensive. So at some point, management needs money to continue their business, but they don't have the money, so they will raise capital by diluting shareholders. Then they will reverse stock split, so shareholders see nothing. Then they will do it again another time, another time, another time. At some point, it's just not viable anymore. So those businesses are just paying themselves, like the owners are paying themselves. But MDA, what's interesting is that they don't raise a lot of capital, and yet they succeed. And so to me, it's a sign that it's a business that's managing super well their financials. And that's why I'm finding it more valuable than, for example, intuitive machines. I think that's mainly why, um, like, I mean, I, I'm thinking to rebalance my intuitive machine gains if it continues to go up, and to MDA mainly for that reason is that I believe long term that like their financials won't go opposite. So it will continue to go up. They will continue to get contracts because companies have trust into MDA for making those satellites. Over time, they have built trust among customers and even among agencies. So the more trust, the more contracts you get, the more bigger contracts you get. And of course, if you execute the very well, those contracts get recognized as revenue very soon, and that's super positive for MDA because they can keep up with the business, expand, and everything. So yeah, that's why I'm super bullish about MDA and why I find it more valuable
So
than
to
other
recap,
companies.
essentially what you're saying is it comes down to experience,
Yeah,
management, and execution. So these are all what I've noticed from what your explanation is here is that these are high quality traits of high
yeah.
quality compounding companies, right?
To me,
So,
yeah,
so
those
I'm not
are yeah,
surprised when I hear you say, "Hey, I want to rebalance my portfolio from a very volatile position that's trading off of a lot of hype, perhaps. Not that they can't get to that potential, but reallocate those funds to a more consistent, high potential, better valuation, predictable machine." Is that
exactly.
a
That's
fair?
right.
Okay, so that's a fair assessment. Okay.
And yeah, another thing to mention is that NVIDIA, as I said earlier, was previously owned by Maxwell Technologies. And yeah, so it has a lot of history and a lot of experience about how to manage a business as well, where you have now some space companies that are like AST Space Mobile. I didn't talk about it today because I'm not a fan of this business. Sorry for those that are watching me who are investing in AST Space Mobile, but I mean, as much as I'm very like passionate about the space industry and all space companies, I think AST Space Mobile is too overhyped. They have, yes, a good technology behind their satellites, but they need to make tons of satellites for their satellite constellation to work. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of cost. Uh, there's a lot of cost associated with those with the manufacture of those satellites, and then you need to launch them as well. So there's a lot of risk, and the business is about this is only focused about this mega constellation. So I find AST Space Mobile very risky compared to other businesses, and that's something I feel like it's a trend right now. So you have many space companies that are just starting out and have only one source of revenue that are like they are counting on, and if this product doesn't do well, or if it costs a lot to make, then they have no choice but to go public, raise capital, dilute shareholders. And it's something Firefly has done recently. So that's part of why I haven't invested in it. In fact, I shorted it a few months back, made a few gains, sold it. And yeah, I think many space companies shouldn't exist in the first place. But of course, more competition is great. And yeah,
Interesting. I want to touch back on the management point you made earlier, just real quick to kind of get as a more of a lesson, a takeaway for people that are watching this video. I think it's super important to, you could have an incredible business, but if the people running said business don't know what they're doing or they can't execute properly, then the business is going to go to the ground and so is your investment. So I think understanding who runs the companies that you're investing into is extremely important, and you should be able to have that conviction and that belief in the management team for the companies that you own, based on the research that you've done. I think that's just a very important takeaway that I found in my personal investing journey, and I'm sure both of you guys would agree. So
Yep.
for my very last question here, Anthony, Nick might have one more, but this is my last one. So for the year of 2026, all right, we've got three space stocks. We've got Rocket Lab, we've got Intuitive, and we've got MDA. Which of the three do you think will have the best performing stock in 2026?
I will
And
go with
why?
intuitive. Oh yeah, I will go with intuitive machines. And let, let's start by just going back to Rocket Lab, just by saying to add a little comment. So I 100% agree with you. And part of the reason I invested in Rocket Lab was because of the CEO, Sir Peter Beck. And yeah, without him, I wouldn't probably investing in Rocket Lab because I trust a lot of his actions, executions, everything. But yeah, to go back to your question, I think intuitive machines is going to be fire for 2026. Not a financial advice, of course, but they will acquire the acquisition will close in January, I think. Sometimes in at least before Q1 ends, so by March, end of March, and once they are into intuitive machines, intuitive machines will start having another segment, a new segment of their business, which is space systems, just as Rocket Lab. And this side of the business is what's making Rocket Lab 75% of their revenue per quarter. So it's super interesting. So for intuitive machines, I think it's going to be the same, and and if not more, because they are already making a lot of space systems solutions day to day, and yeah, so I think that will be the first catalyst. Second catalyst will be the potential win for the lunar terrain vehicle. So if they get awarded, which I think they will because they got their vehicle human rated, the CEO also hinted a bit shoulders that they might get awarded the way he worded it. So last year, for instance, during Q2 2024, the CEO hinted shoulders that they were on track to get awarded the $4 billion contract for the near space network. So that's the infrastructure thing, so that there is communication between the moon and Earth. So that's one of their contracts. They were making some telecommunication satellites. And yeah, the CEO hinted this, like gave a hint during the earnings call in August 2024. And a few weeks later, bam, the contract appeared and the stock surged. I think the CEO hinted again, but of course, this is speculation and not a financial advice or anything, but he seemed very confident about getting this contract. And I mean, I don't think a CEO would be like, will word to shareholder that they are confident enough about getting a huge contract to shareholders to not have it in the end. So I'm pretty sure they have good chances of getting this contract awarded. And this is going to be the second catalyst. Actually, the first, because this one is due by end of 2025, but because of the government shutdown, that's a risk I haven't talked about today, but relying on government contracts is that things can slip super easily. So you have a government shutdown, everything gets slipped, and so it affected some space companies over the past few months, and this will probably get reflected for the next quarters. So maybe some contracts that haven't been fulfilled because of the shutdown, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, this one is due by end of 2024, beginning of 2026. Then the Lenteris acquisition will close by end of Q1. And then Q4 2026, there's going to be the third landing mission for Lunar. So they will, for a third time, send instruments to the moon for NASA, but also for other space agencies like the European Space Agency, I think, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, I think they have some instruments they will send, and also instruments from some universities and support with NASA and other agencies. So it's going to be super great, and that's not their main source of revenue, but this is what drives the most amount of hype. I know Wall Street bets and other places, gambling places gets very on fire when intuitive machines lands on the moon, and so the stock will probably get a lot of the stock will probably be very volatile end of next year when this happens. So yeah, those missions are a great way to test volatility in your portfolio and to learn about the risk to take and everything. I've learned a lot last year and the previous year during the past two lunar missions, because my portfolio went from plus 200% to minus 50% to plus 70% to minus 60%. So yeah, very volatile. It's a roller coaster day to day, and yeah, I think this is going to be a great year for intuitive machines.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the last question. We just talked about 2026 and your forecast for 2026, and Trevor touched on, hey, what's the best opportunity? And you think obviously Lunar is going to be that stock. My question for you is touching on a little bit longer term horizon, right?
Yep.
I take you as more of a contrarian investor. You shorted ASTS when it was at its highs. You have to be contrarian if you're going to do something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, I want to extrapolate a little bit because I'm a technologist. I focus on the tech industry, and I've been attracted to the space industry because you and I both agree we're seeing a little bit of a merger occurring over time here. Now, expanding our horizons and looking outward, I see right now in the AI opportunity, the AI revolution, some of the most appealing opportunities are those AI derivatives, not necessarily associated with the CapEx build out of infrastructure, data centers, or those hyperscalers providing those data center services, but the companies that are building tool sets and helping enterprises with operations and actually impacting those bottom line earnings using AI. I'm talking about companies like Zeta Global or UiPath, right? And it takes some contrarian level thinking here because you have to go from, that primary level, secondary level to tertiary level thinking.
Yeah.
Extrapolating to the space industry, where do you see those opportunities? Are they private companies? Are they public companies? My mind initially goes to those geospatial technology companies like Planet Labs or Black Skies. However, you may know some others, and this is an opportunity here for you to kind of say, okay, let's have some fun with this. Where do I see those long-term opportunities? Where do I see those
Yep.
benefits, right?
I think I see them really I think it's so, for now it's just the beginning, and it's been the beginning for years, but it will always be the beginning because the space industry is a sector that's evolving rapidly, but also it's a sector that's always you always learn something new when you study something. And so, for instance, NASA sent the James Webb Space Telescope in December 2021, I think, and this like allows scientists to learn more about our universe. And then maybe you discover something, and so you need another satellite. And then this satellite will discover something that needs another satellite. Then you have maybe some air-powered thing into those satellites to power the decisions and empower how you can discover things. So it's really helpful for scientists. And the more you learn, the more you keep learning in space. It's never going to stop. And so even in 20 years and 30 years, 100% I'd still be in space stocks. And I guess it will remain the same. It won't be boring like some tech stocks where it's just something that exists since 50 years. Space industry is always evolving, and we're seeing now is exactly what's happened decades ago, where we were still we were discovering new things, and in a few years we will discover maybe new things on the moon that will require more satellites, more infrastructure and space. And so governments will continue to contract companies like Intuitive Machines to build more infrastructure and more satellites that can help not only advancing the progress of humanity, but also making sure for instance, the US stays first in the race, and etc. So it will always, I think, remain the same. And unfortunately, like, I mean, even though like the International Space Station is probably the closest space, like government entities have been close together. Like Russia was still operating with the US, has been operating with the US since, has continued to operate with the US since the war in Ukraine, yet it's still in space. And there's been no issue, but some propaganda. But other than that, it's been a super peaceful journey for Russia and USA and space together. And that's probably the only the ISS was, and why was, is because it's going to be decommissioned in 2030. So SpaceX got a contract from the US government to decommission the space station. So it's going to crash, burn in the atmosphere, and the next station will be around the moon. But will the next station around the moon be as peaceful as the one we have now with the ISS? That's the question. And so I think there will still be like a race between entities. US will want to be first, Canada will want to be first, the European Space Agency will want to be first, China will want to be first, India will want to be first. So lots of entities want to be first. And that's one of the issues, is that instead of collaborating with each other, everyone is making their space thing in their own side. And there's not a lot of collaboration between those entities, while this is what would enable the progress of humanity, and what's enabling discoveries that can help also companies to build more satellites and etc. And so that would be great for a portfolio, of course, as a space stock owner, if entities were collaborating with each other and be in complete peace.
So I think to kind of just summarize there, essentially what you're saying as your long-term horizon is going to be more, since the space industry is so complex, and like you said, we're learning new things every day, every week, it's
Yep.
going to be more of adapting to what we figure out more about the space industry in the future, and then what we're going to need to provide what it is that we're learning about. Is that correct?
Exactly. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And a quick example is with the Mars rover Perseverance that was launched in 2020. So this rover from NASA has the capability of collecting samples, and the goal is to bring back those samples. But one thing is that NASA has recently, like they had some like rebalancing with their fiscal budget for NASA. And with the Trump administration, like I think NASA budget got reduced with Musk and all the cuts he did. So and that program was like not over, but like it's borderline between the we will do it and we will not do it. And so you have Rocket Lab, who got a proposal for bringing back those samples, but it seems to not be the focus of NASA anymore. So it's always like what the focus is and how companies and agencies can build something to meet those focus and discover things. But there will always be a like money inside that will like that the money will decide like where things are going on. And more often that's not the best solution, because to enable the real progress in space, you need to think more of how, like, the return and how much it costs. If you discover that there is life on Mars, maybe it's worth paying 10 billion more to build something that's working and that can really prove it and bring back samples and everything. So that's something super interesting. And yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Anthony, this has been incredible. For those of you who don't know, we've been trying to set up this interview for like the past 6 months. We've all been incredibly busy. So it's been awesome chatting with you,
Yeah,
Anthony. Do you have
it's been
anything
great.
else? Anything
No,
last that you want to say for the community?
space stocks are great, but it's super volatile. So be cautious. And space stocks perceptions is a terrible idea. I did it a few times with LUNR, lost a lot of money, but yeah, stay cautious. And I mean, if you are willing to have a 75% space stocks allocation in your portfolio like me, make sure like you take the time to understand the risks. I've been investing in space stocks. I've been having this kind of allocation since I began my investing journey in December 2023. And like, to me, it's normal to see swings of 5% up and down, up and down. And I've even seen a swing of 17% down when LUNR crashed their LUNR lander. So you got to be ready to fill those swings. And it can be great when it's going up, but when it's going down, you must be rational and continue to think for the long term, because it's like the long term truly matters. And it's going to be a super like, and great industry to watch for the next few years as we go back to the moon, focus on building more techs in space, like AI data centers and everything.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, everyone.